is Pat Barrett. How are you doing? Welcome to the new Women's Radio, Women's Radio 2. And we are returning to something that we know now that's more familiar, a wonderful guest that's been with us for many sessions now. And we're going to do another very, very interesting session with Christine Baumgartner, who talks about relationships, something that we all really care about. So whether it's a personal romantic relationship, or whether it's a working relationship, or just co-working together in some way or another, we're all interested about having good relationships, good abilities to do things well, so that we're happy and other people are happy. I guess that would be an easy way to put that. Today, we're going to talk about relationships, or basically how to get along well when you're traveling. Now, some of this will be, and we'll start by talking about when men and women have to travel together for business. But of course, that's not the only time men and women are together when they travel. So we'll probably cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. So hold on to your seat and let me introduce Christine Baumgartner. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Pat. It's lovely to talk to you again. These are always such fun conversations. And yes, men and women can find themselves in so many different situations. And today we're going to talk about traveling, whether you're traveling for business with a colleague, or if you're traveling personal with somebody that you're probably romantically involved with. So there's all those different levels and everywhere in between. So if we talk about
strangers on a trip.
Now that could happen too. I probably should address that. I've known a couple couples that happened, and they ended up being married for a really long time.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
My mom had a friend who was going to meet her fiance and got on a cross the country train, sat next to a soldier that was going cross country to be with his fiance. And they talked for 3 or 4 days that it took them to go across country. They got off the train and each called their respective fiancés and canceled their weddings and got married. And they were married for 50 something years before he died.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that an amazing story?
Romantic.
It's very romantic. But
I don't know what their other halves thought, but maybe
it's pretty sad. But what was fascinating, because I love asking people those kinds of questions, because I knew them since I was kids. My parents were friends with them since probably before I was born. What did they talk about that whole time? And it turned out that the thing that really astounded both of them is how much more they found out about this other person, and this person found out about them, than they even knew about the people they were going to marry. Because people didn't have those kinds of conversations. And still to this day, people don't have those kinds of conversations. It's what I teach people to have, so that you really do get to know this person and they really get to know you. And it's not just you both like Chinese food and Mel Brooks movies, but we will talk about that at another time, because today we're just talking about traveling. But I thought it was the sweetest story. It's been such a lovely story. It's not urban legend. It really did happen to the Welters. So traveling for business, it can be smooth or the most awkward thing in the world. And if we start out knowing that you're both reasonable, rational people, we'll say one or both of you are in some sort of a committed relationship with a significant other, whether you're married or not, but it's a committed relationship. Then people say, well, everybody knows what's going on. No, you need to talk about it. Here we are back to you have to talk about it. So that you say out loud, we're having separate rooms on opposite floors or down the hall. It's not convenient to have rooms next to each other. It's not convenient. When I had my event planning company, I liked a lower floor near the elevator, because it was a waste of my time to have to walk to an elevator and go down a bunch of floors. So if they both like being on a lower floor, they're just across the hall or farther down the hall. Just do that on purpose, because you're making a statement of, we're having rooms very far apart. You also are never alone. If you go have dinner, you have dinner in a public place. If you are there with other colleagues, you're all together. And the big rule I give people is, the only conversations you can have with each other is as if your significant others were sitting in the other two chairs at the table. You're not allowed to complain about them. You're not allowed to talk behind their back. That's what therapists and girlfriends and close friends are for. That is not what you do with a colleague, because we all have heard stories, even if it didn't happen to us personally, that once you start opening that door of, I'm having a hard time in my marriage and they don't understand me, which could be very true, and you have this sympathetic person listening to you, you've now formed a bond outside your marriage with somebody else, and that's inappropriate. It's inappropriate. If you're not happy in your marriage, then you talk to your partner about it. You go have counseling together. You go have your own counseling to leave the marriage. So I get frustrated when people say, yeah, I knew I ended up with an emotional affair because I was so unhappy in my marriage. Well, your choices in your marriage are you stay and complain, or you stay and stop complaining, or you leave. Those are and nobody wants to hear any of those rules. So the other thing is, if you're going to travel in a car, it's nice who gets to be the navigator and who's going to be the driver. This could cross over to the personal side too. So whoever is the driver, and whoever is the navigator is the navigator. And you need to stay in your own lane while you're doing that, because it's not good to have one or both people in the car get upset while one of the people that's getting upset is driving.
Amen.
So that's a really inappropriate thing. And then you're going to show up at this business meeting where maybe you're trying to close a deal and you're all huffy with each other. And I don't care how well you are at faking, the people are going to know. And that's not going to be conducive to closing a deal in my book. Since I get to give all this advice, I'd love for you all to tell me I'm full of beans and I should change my mind. But right now I get to just tell you everything I've seen not work.
Well, I think that what you said was that they show up and they think nobody notices, but everybody does. And you know what? That's always true. It's just like when people are dating in a company and they show up pretending like they don't know each other, and everybody knows that they're together. Everybody. And and you know what's true? People always know. Who is it that doesn't know? You know, those things show up so fast, and you're not going to pull the wool down over anybody's face. So you might as well come to grips, right?
Say it out loud. Say it out loud. Because the thing is, when people say that nobody knows, I go, but do you know who's together? Oh yeah, I do. Well, then of course they all know you do. You're not the smartest person at work about this. There's maybe one or two. I'm not saying everybody in the company, but there's not just you who can spot the people. There's at least one.
Right.
If there's 300 people at the company, there's at least 2 or 3. So
that have this extrasensory perception, as it were.
Yeah. So, but back to traveling. Traveling, everybody has their strength. I am a really good map reader. I'm a very good driver. My favorite thing is not to drive in a strange place, though. I would much rather have somebody giving me directions. I mean, I like my car does that now, but before I had somebody that sat next to me and read a map, or I was happy to sit next to them and read a map. So it's important to have one person in charge of one thing and one in charge of another. Okay. Because I know men, and I accept this about men, and I love men. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know I like men a lot. And men really like doing it themselves. They like figuring out themselves. They generally don't like asking for help until they've already exhausted every other way of doing it, and then they'll ask for help. And in this instance, in work, it's very important, because you don't want to be late to the appointment. You really want to get there not all ruffled feathers, to give that up. Okay, I need you to tell me how to get there, and I'm going to drive. You decide. The guy's driving, the woman's giving directions. The man's driving, the woman's giving the other way around. The woman's driving the man. So that you already know ahead of time that you're not going to say, oh yeah, I know where I'm going. Depend on your navigator. That's what they're there for. In personal relationships, I've told women that when men want to get there and you haven't had this discussion, then just keep your mouth shut, because he will figure it out or he'll ask for help. But not in a business, because you want to get to your appointment on time. It's really important. And this is how you can treat this business relationship really businessy and not so personally.
Yes,
Because
yes,
that's when
yes.
you get in trouble, is so let's, even if you're not dating at work, it can still get kind of muddy if you don't stay businessy.
Well, and to some of the points that you've made in the past, women will traditionally kind of back off of being the person, well, I'm in charge of this, and let's come to an agreement about that. They just, well, whatever you say, darling, without saying those words. But that's not how it's going to work out best in business. So it's a matter of coming together. It's equals and saying, okay, let's pick a job, and your job is to do this, and my job will be to do this, and I promise to do my job. And if we have a disagreement, then I'm going to ask you to pull over to the side of the road so we can work that out.
Yeah.
So if you need to see the map or whatever you need, but people don't do those things. They wait till the worst happens.
Yes. It's awful, especially in business. If you want to get this job, you want to have this proposal, you want to get this customer, then you need to make your emotions stay in a very professional way. You have to have your emotions stay very top, the top of the line emotion, logical, reasonable, rational. And it's a challenge
It
for both
is.
sides.
Yeah,
And
because
it's
you
funny
have
when
to
you
do things
said,
that you may not be so comfortable with, or
yeah,
that you're not accustomed to doing it.
yeah,
And in a personal relationship, you may be able to stuff it, but you can't stuff it when something like this demands certain actions from you in order for things to turn out in a business-like manner.
yeah.
So actually, I always have thought businesses require that you grow. And
Mhm.
this is like the perfect example that you've chosen.
Thank you. And I think it's important to keep growing in personal relationships. That's such a good point that
I
you
agree.
brought up,
Mhm.
because it's sad when I've had people say, when they're going out on dates, I'm worried that we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. Well, then you are so not with the right person. Because my brother and sister-in-law just celebrated 49 years. The woman I go horseback riding with just celebrated 60 years of marriage. And they have
Oh,
never run out of things to talk about. Every time I'm with them, they're and they have both of them equally have so much to share about their day and what's going on and some new thoughts and what they saw in the news. I mean, they're fascinating people, and they are fascinated by each other, and they're sharing stuff. So yeah,
I
if
agree.
you're running out of stuff to talk about, you're not at the right place. It's kind of shocking the first time somebody said that to me. I said, well, that's a good touchstone. Yeah, I don't think you're dating the right person. And I don't think they're dating the right person if you're running out of stuff to talk about. So figuring out what's your place at work, what's your official job, and how can you carry that through while you're traveling? Now, it might be that you're going to switch some things when you're traveling, that this person is the person that normally, leads things, but wow, you're a better navigator. Well, then I'll be the leader when we're in the car, or when we're getting on a train, or when we're getting on the plane. I mean, it doesn't make either of you wrong. It just makes somebody better at one thing than the other. And that's really very adult if you can say, okay, good, you take that over because you're better at that than me. And I'm better at this, so I'll take this part over. But you have a discussion ahead of time so
Right.
that, especially if stuff happens on the fly, you're like, oh, right, I'm the person in charge of that. Or, oh, great, you're in charge of that. People say, why would we have to talk about it? Because so many people get in fights because they don't talk about it.
Well, and some of the other things you pointed out, like the personality traits that people have and so forth,
Yeah.
just because a man is in a male body doesn't necessarily mean that he's the most assertive person in
Oh,
that two-way situation. So sometimes that is the perfect time for the woman to be assertive, but you have to you have to get to a point where you have verbalized that, or you've come to an agreement about how it's going to be.
yeah.
And usually the men that I found who are not as assertive, they'll say, listen, you feel free to say this, or if you see something, you can say this to me. This is the way I normally will respond, blah, 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 whatever it is. And that's very helpful.
Oh, it's so helpful if people can say, no, I really like doing this. Just checking with you, or the other person goes, oh my God, I'm so glad that you do that. Just checking with you, and keep checking in. Don't
Oh, good
assume,
idea.
because we women especially get really resentful when we think something should be happening or not happening, but we don't say it. So say
Right.
out loud ahead of time, this is what I think is happening. Is this what you're thinking is happening? Is this our next step? Is this what we're doing next? And men are really good about that. They're really good about going, oh yeah, great. Thanks for checking in. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That was what I was thinking, or wow, I hadn't thought of that. Good point. I mean, we women are the ones that don't say, because we're the ones that often have way more feelings about stuff. We have feelings about how this is going to be handled and how something's going to be done. And the guy's just generally has thought about it and is just doing it. And he hasn't had a lot of feelings about it. So if we have a feeling about it, it's good to say, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm feeling. What do you think?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, going back to the point we were talking about the different personality traits, and I was just ruminating about this situation, like two people going on a business trip, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems like it would pay big dividends for people to be more in tune with what personality traits are, and the people going on a trip should really get to know each other a little bit better in that way, and it would help the trip and the outcome of the business that they're about to do. But it's also true that it could be two women who are like completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than having conflict, the same thing, the same kind of communications, open communications, and acknowledging what you're good at and what you're not good at, and who's going to do what is a real big help.
Well, we'll just send them back to our first Myers-Briggs and discs
I
and love
think
language
so.
videos. And if you watch all of those, and whoever it is you're traveling with watches them and does the quizzes, you'll know a lot about yourself and the other person to say, oh, this is what you're good at. This is what I'm good at. This is how we can balance. It can help
Yes.
so much better. Traveling can be so much more smooth if everybody does the thing that's easy for them instead of
Yes.
trying to do everything, even the things that are hard. Why not let somebody else do the thing that they go, oh yeah, I'm happy to do that. I like that part. I like doing the kiosk check-in thing, or I like the ordering the food ahead of time. You
Right,
know,
right,
find out what oh yeah, you like
right.
that better. Oh, great, you go do that.
To that point too, I traveled to India 10 years ago with a really good friend of mine. And after I decided to do it, I thought, Pat, have you lost your mind? You have never been on a long trip with this person. You have no idea what they might be like on a long trip. Maybe the part that you see is, just getting together to eat potato chips on Friday night. Maybe that won't work on a trip.
Yeah.
But I don't it worked out amazingly well, because one of the things I learned about myself was I was really happy when someone else took charge and did all the planning. I could hardly believe that. I think I've been so used to doing everything that it was a joy to give that up and just say, anything you want to do will make me happy. And it did.
Wow.
I found that I could be happier by just finding the joy in any new thing that I saw or any new experience that we had. It made a big difference. But we had a great time, never argued one time, not one time. Yep.
That's pretty amazing, Pat. What a good thing
Right.
to learn, at least after the fact. So now you know ahead of time to say this to the people that you travel with. Yeah, my friend that I go riding with, she travels a lot, and we've traveled a little, but more locally. And I said, you've heard me talk about how I bring a lot of stuff, and I'm just letting you know, you would never probably want to go on a European trip with me. My husband didn't care because Donna packs so little. And I just don't. I just don't. I have to have all my stuff. But it was fine driving. We drove up to the Northern California. We spent a week doing mission stuff because
Oh,
she's a
really? Oh,
docent,
going to
not
visit.
she's a docent at
Oh,
the mission in San I know that sounded weird when I said that. So we stopped at the missions on the way up. There was a whole docent thing up there where all the
oh,
people
that's
from all,
nice.
oh, it was so fascinating. And then we
Uh-huh.
stopped at different missions on the way back. So she made all those plans because she knew that, and I got to pick out food, and it was just fun. It was really fun. I got a special dinner for her birthday. And so we
Aw.
did the things that we were like. And so she's like, yeah, boy, what do you do when you go to Europe? I said, I bring this big suitcase. This is how I travel. I have my great big purse and my big suitcase. She went, wow. So we haven't traveled overseas. because I don't think that would be a problem, but we've learned how different we are. So to just see who you are and tell the other person and find out how they are, it's essential. I mean, really. And then just to always be cognizant of that you're never alone and you don't have personal conversations, because that just leads to problems in business. That's
Yes,
when I'm going
right.
to tie it up with a little bow. I'm going to start out with that. I'm going to end with that, because that's where a lot of problems can happen.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and there's still, I think, some
As
more
usual.
to go, because everybody's going to find themselves in other situations, whether it's traveling for business or lots of other things. And I think that the things that you're talking about, things that work, things that don't work, are somewhat universal.
For sure.
And the sooner we recognize that and we prepare against it, we grow up, put on our big girl shorts and so forth and so on, as it were, the happier everybody's going to be. And actually, I think that's why we're doing this program, is to increase the level of happiness of everybody by coming to grips with things.
Acknowledge and celebrate the differences.
That's right.
Because there's nothing bad about them. There's nothing
No.
bad, just different. And if we stop getting upset about the differences and go, oh, there's help that it's different. Oh, it's a good balance that it's different. Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And so, stop getting upset because that person doesn't respond to you just the way you thought that they should,
So we
or
go back to the panties, stop getting your panties in a wad, right?
that's right.
Well, thank
Well,
you, Pat. It's always delightful to talk to you.
it is. It's fun and enlightening. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.